can tie him up with Fox News soon because that was an interesting episode. But it's this idea of a profound hatred of the state, of central banking as a concept, and of course, where fear of central banking exists, they start having these conversations about the Rothschilds and the like. Oh my goodness! The last time I heard a big conversation about the Rothschilds, believe it or not, Jace, was with the flat earthers. That was remember that came up pretty heavily there. Hey, look, I can hear headphones, which means we're live with Olivier Jutel. Hello. Hey, Pat, how's it going?
Good. I have known you now for
well, it seems like a long time.
22 hours.
But it's about that.
So we got together yesterday to have a chat about a few things. Kind of a mutual contact connected us, and you said some very magical words to me.
Well, you said some magical words to me, which was why are we meeting again?
Yeah,
that was kind of funny.
And you said I did my PhD in Fox News.
Oh, jeez. Not in Fox News, not in the building.
No, but on Fox News, referencing Fox News, and from an angle of, give us the title again.
Oh gosh, it's a long one.
Yeah.
The main title is called. It's a bit literary. Liberalism and its populist excess, and that's kind of alluding to how a liberal technocratic post-politics produces this populist outsider or enemy that keeps growing in, I don't know, political power and anger and all that visceral hatred, which we are seeing in the year 2019 really, in a sense, dominate Western liberal democracies the world over. The subtitle of the PhD was, I think, Barack Obama, the Tea Party, Fox News, and the Field of Journalism. And for me, what was kind of interesting about this moment is you had this incredible triumphalism in the election of Obama. I mean, it's a great moment. I mean, I'm cynical and I have this kind of view of politics, which is, Obama had some problematic things that he was bringing to bear, but nevertheless, the power of symbolism and what that kind of engendered in the American public that had gone through 8 years of Bush. I mean, it's we think things are bad now. My God, it's hard to overstate how dark that time was.
But isn't it ironic that people now look back wistfully to George W. Like, if only we could have George W. again.
Now that's sick. I mean, that's absolutely pathological. I mean, because of just how disastrously bad. I mean, he launched, the Iraq War, we all know, and this is literally why there is a refugee crisis that is precipitating the rise of the global far-right anti-immigrant populists. So this whole thing, like the Ellen DeGeneres and Michelle Obama and George W. Bush shared like a Werther's original or something, is really kind of sick fanfic. Like it's
mission accomplished.
Yeah. Geez. I mean, again, as far as listen, Trump is terrible. He's awful. What's happening at the border is horrific. But he has not even come close to being as much of a disaster for America as George W. Bush. But people forget that.
And especially on the like global, the impact on the world, etc. It feels like that. It feels like that Trump is a much worse person.
Oh,
but Bush was a much worse influence.
So, I think that Trump being a terrible person, like everything about him, the narcissism. I mean, and some of this is like,
fake news, fake news, fake news.
The way he coins. Take something like fake news. He's able to coin language in a way that just infects our brain. One of my favorite.
He's a salesman.
Yeah, he's that. But just how deplorable and disgusting a human being. Whether it's the stories with his relations with and we all know the Access Hollywood tapes, all the rest of it, and the mafioso connections in real estate, not paying Polish workers on some of his big projects, all the rest of it is very instructive about what's happening to America's political institutions and, frankly, how broken they are. Yeah. So, or the fact that, like, with Mohammed bin Salman.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
I think it'll be interesting today because what I feel like after our chat yesterday was you have a perspective on, especially American media. Your doctorate is sort of in right-wing American media and the influence around it versus left-wing. I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Sure.
So I think it'll be really interesting as well. We can talk about whatever we want. You know how this thing rolls.
Sure.
But not to spend a huge amount of time on also relitigating. Everyone's heard the bollocks about what he's done. I could shoot a person in Manhattan, I wouldn't lose a vote. Actually, kind of believe that he probably wouldn't, because he's down to that core. But I'm fascinated as to how the complex in America works, especially the media complex. I follow American politics probably more closely than I do New Zealand. Certainly at the moment. Right. Next year it might flip because we've got an election as well.
It's a great spectator sport.
It is, and shouldn't be. That's a terrifying way to think about it. Or you could use the word it's a soap opera, or it's a spectator sport, or it's a blood sport sometimes.
And with social media and the efficacy with which Trump uses Twitter, and I'm really sorry, but like sometimes genuinely against my own better self, to humorous effect. I mean,
I've heard professional comedians say he would do very well as a comedian.
In a 1950s, I don't know, Las Vegas.
Yeah, take my wife, please.
Exactly, the Don Rickles thing. Yeah. And or listen, when he destroyed Jeb Bush on the debate stage and said, "Look, your brother, disaster, terrible, one of the worst things we ever did." I'm sorry, but it's hard not to hoot and holler at that. As disgusting and reprehensible a person as he is, and because he's so self-centered, he has no follow-through for any of the things on whatever being so-called anti-war or whatever. Like, he doesn't believe any of it. He only believes in himself. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, it's instructive. He's pointing at a thing that people want some kind of emotional release over, and often for the wrong reasons, often right for the wrong reasons. But yeah, he has mastered. So, okay, the internet and politics after the internet, that's obviously, it's a huge topic, but he has broken kind of Fox News's gatekeeping role. Mm-hmm. And part of how you have to understand the emergence of Fox News is the American right, dating back to the mid to late 70s, were very concerned about all the different aspects of kind of civil rights and anti-war, and a progressive movement in the 70s that was gaining a lot of steam.
That was their concerns.
Well, so there's a great there's a thing called the Powell Memo, which was written by a former Supreme Court justice, which is to say, free enterprise, champions of free enterprise in America need to coalesce politically and start beating back the kind of progressive liberal pinko hordes. And we have kind of the birth of billionaire political activism, mm-hmm. which spawns Heritage Foundation, Cato Institute, a bunch of political advocacy groups, links in with the college Republicans, has kind of like benign institutes for journalism, which catapult the careers of a bunch of right-wing figures. I mean, Ben Shapiro is an absolute boilerplate classic example of this kind of figure. And Fox News was this thing that kind of corralled them, that gave these people a platform, a bit of an echo chamber, and to talk about conservatism with talk about Austrian free market economics and some of the kind of social conservatism as well. But it was very kind of highbrow, even though it was, doing culture wars and all the rest. But now when you are middle American suburban boomer grandparents mm-hmm. can just indulge constantly through Facebook and all the rest of it, like Fox News doesn't necessarily play that role, and Trump tapped those people.
But I also saw, and because that is their lifeline, Fox News. I mean, the average viewer on Fox News, Google that, JC, average age, but it's something like 72 or something like that, the average age of a Fox viewer. Mm-hmm. And they're also, research shows, the most ill-informed voters in America. Yeah. And there was a fantastic example. I was watching a clip online. I think it might have been from CNN. They were having a conversation with some people at a Fox rally, and this woman said, oh, there you go, 66 in 2016. There was this woman who literally said, I'm confused by all these negative things you're saying about Fox, about Trump, because I've never heard anything negative about Trump.
There's an even better one, which is an exit poll interview with a guy in West Virginia who voted for another Google one, the CEO of Massey Energy, which was a coal mine disaster in West Virginia where, was it Pike River? That's 29. It's either in the teens or in the 20s. And the CEO of Massey Energy was standing for a by-election. I'm really sorry. Maybe it was governor. Maybe it was Congress. I forget. But they had your typical West Virginia Trump blue collar Republican saying, yeah, my cousin died in that coal mine disaster, but you know what? He's a crook, but he tells it like it is, you know? And that just really, that taps something really kind of both a kind of visceral anger, nihilism, cynicism that is a big part of this kind of Trump populist energy. I mean,
there is an element though, and I've heard many commentators say that there has to be a tipping point, and maybe Trump is the figure that will break the break the system in America to send it off on a better path. I don't know if that will or won't happen. I don't know, but there is this thing about Trump. When you say he tells it like it is, he doesn't. He's full of shit.
Of course.
I was thinking as you were talking, often you hear people trying to figure out what his doctrine is. Like, is he really right-wing? Is he really conservative? And his doctrine is Trump. He follows the doctrine of Trump.
Yes.
And that means if he and his family benefits from what's going on, that's where he will go. But I do like, I don't know if like is the right word with Donald Trump, but when basically things like the Secret Service would say to a president, you can't have a cell phone or you can't use Twitter, Trump basically goes, I'm president, I'll do what I want. You don't tell me what to do. And it's an interesting dynamic.
Well, so he's breaking decorum. And all right, yes, Trump is, of course, a liar and with no discernible political core outside of his own interests. But he does capture a kind of like emotional and, fancy academic big word, libidinal truth about the kind of rage people in America want to express. And that can be indeterminate. That can be used for evil, like, towards Muslims and immigrants, or, people have a genuine rage towards Wall Street and the health insurance industry. And, you could channel that in democratic ways that would dissipate some of the alienation and anger and hatred that kind of courses through the veins of the Trump base. But American liberal political establishment cannot fathom that idea. They're just as horrified of that idea as they are of Trump. There was 2 points to what I was going to respond to, and I totally forgot what that second part was.
Well, what I was thinking as you were talking to them too, I'll come back to you, was one of the ironies being all of those things that is he is a response to would have ticked the boxes if Bernie had to run against him in the likely scenario. And then you have to look at Hillary Clinton and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and think, how much did they actually screw over the country by rigging the Democrats? So then you have to go, the Democrats probably you got to lay it at their feet that this guy is elected.
Pat, haven't you heard? It's Vladimir Putin. It's all Vladimir. All right, sorry. I'm obviously tongue in cheek here, and but yes, like there was. When we talk about how broken the system is, Donald Trump did not want to be president.
Yeah, no, I there were many aides within it. He didn't want to do it.
He said losing was winning. It was a marketing gambit.
Yep.
And the whole thing actually started because he was going to go into renegotiating for The Apprentice. This was all kind of... So the guy who did not want to be elected was elected president.
And it appears the only reason he wants to be re-elected is then that the statutes of limitation on some potential charges are up during a second term.
Yeah, sure. And then the person who's wanted to run a coronation as a primary process wanted Trump to get the nomination because they thought that they wrote this in this thing called the Pied Piper strategy. But damn, we're relitigating 2016 and that sucks. And then Bernie only ran because Elizabeth Warren wouldn't run because he wanted... like somebody out there to push Hillary Clinton, who, unfortunately, of course, sexism played a huge role in why she lost. But
a huge role or a role?
All right, it's complicated. It's hard to say. I think that if Biden, because Biden is in many senses worse than Hillary on things like criminal justice. Mm-hmm. So like. When it comes to talking about, locking up the animals and keeping them off the street, Hillary said some stuff that was really bad, like the super predator clip, and that got used against her and dinged her big time. But like Biden is worse. Now the Clintons are a little bit more, look, they're a longer established brand. So maybe some of that people have hated the Clinton brand for longer. But of course, she has been hated as a professional, aspirational career woman, and for a certain part of kind of conservative America, that's anathema to their kind of family values or what all the rest of it. So if Biden was able to run successfully against Trump, for me, that would be a pretty strong indication of some inherent sexism. Now, that's not to say that Hillary didn't run just a diabolically bad campaign, just an appallingly bad campaign.
And a diabolically bad candidate. The two most hated candidates ever
that's
were the
objective.
two people
I'm sorry,
running.
but that's an objective fact. I know that upsets a lot of people because there are people that are genuinely invested in Hillary, and there are still people genuinely invested in the notion that Robert Mueller is going to declare her God Empress or something through. I mean, like, this is irrational stuff. This is not dealing in politics as it really exists. So, but yes, the fact that you had a primary process that was so corrupt, and actually, do you know what happened is that you got to blame Obama for this, because in 2012, because American Democrats somehow only care about presidential races. So Obama ran up a massive bill for the DNC for his 2012 reelection campaign, and we now know that the Hillary and her largesse, and I mean that's not a slight, largesse, she's a political machine. The Clintons are a political machine. Essentially bailed out the DNC for the 2016 run while saying, look, we need control of these key mechanisms and levers. And that's why it was. I mean, they bought out the campaign process. Yes, it was done fairly by the bylaws of the party, although it's not really a party in a classical sense. It's more like an association of office holders. But what I'm trying to say here is it's bad. The politics in America is a really broken process, and I don't have the kind of optimism that Trump can make it so demonstrably bad that it has to change, because things can always get worse, and you're seeing that on
true.
some issues.
No, that's true. And I also think with Trump making things worse and sending things down the rabbit hole or down the toilet or down the whatever into the sewerage, filling the swamp, you might say, there seems to be a pushback within his own sort of government to actually keep America safer from him. You're hearing stories these days about aides and people working in and around the White House not giving him information or ignoring his orders.
Well, now, hold on a second, though. This is a really incredible thing, because the New York Times published an editorial, and it was just the most self-serving, aggrandizing thing by some careerist Republican person that's part of the Trump inner circle. And it was like, I forget the headline exactly, but it was something like, I'm part of the resistance from the inside. And it was an admission that, and the substance of the article was like, actually, I really like what Trump's doing on economics and foreign policy, but his decorum, ugh. So what I'm doing is I'm actually thwarting an acting president and, working against them, which again it's not quite I'm looking for the right word. It's not a palace coup, but can you imagine how the levers of power would work if a Bernie Sanders was in office and people were cheerleading from the sidelines of somebody thwarting a sitting president?
But then again,
that's not a defense of Trump.
No. But I think it's fairly well known that Reagan's dementia was pretty bad towards the end,
and Trump's got something. Sorry, I shouldn't. I don't know if that's able. I mean, he's clearly not sharp and firing. I mean, like his press conferences, it's just we're witnessing kind of whatever kind of gurglings of the dark part of his brain just kind of coming out and no inhibition, and it's
but there has been evidence of previous administrations where people on the sidelines were actually doing the running, not necessarily the president. And I would say Reagan would be one of them.
Yep. And actually, it looks like Pompeo and Bolton are trying on the sidelines to start a war with Iran. Yeah. Yes. So yes, and that's partly because he is disinterested. He's not. I mean, look, some people say he's illiterate. I mean, sorry, I don't. Whatever. I mean, but his capacity for in-depth engagement with policy or even politics. I mean, like, I remember when some of this Russia stuff was first popping off, and they had, look, here's your lines, here are your talking points, and he goes out and talks to, it wasn't Barbara Walters, but some kind of 60 Minutes person, and boom, is straight off the cuff freestyling, and they wanted me to say this, but actually no, let me tell you about. And it's like, imagine the idea that he conspired with Russia. Imagine trying to conspire with somebody who is operating at that level of cognition. I mean, it's simply not possible.
I think that what you're facing, if there is a cognitive, issue with him or whatever, but I think one of the things that's fairly obvious with Trump that you're dealing with is someone who's never been told no in his life. Someone who grew up wealthy, who has always been probably not the most liked person in the room, but the person with the most power in the room, the most money in the room, who has always thought he was the most liked in the room because no one would say, you're a bit of a dick and you need to back off.
His whole shtick in his whatever private boys' school he went to was to be the kind of prefect, military discipline guy getting kids detentions for not having their shirts tucked in, or a real suck up to power. And that and obviously enjoying. I mean, look, I don't want to psychologize that too much, but with a real kind of mendacious streak and whatever. I mean, it's a bit hack to talk about the daddy issues, but that is a thing. And for me, it's a really it's all right. So I mentioned Austrian economics, and Hayek wrote in Road to Serfdom that actually the market is not this perfect arbiter of merit, because if it were an arbiter of merit, we would be mad about knowing objectively that they were our social betters. And we know objectively that Trump is not our social better, and he is this dumbass, I don't know, whatever, however you want to describe him, who's winged it,
non-intellect,
and
unacademic, non-intellect,
completely uninterested, and brags about never reading his own book while it's also the greatest book of all time. And
did you see the quote about when he was? I don't know how old it was, but he was being interviewed. Just saw a clip. He was being interviewed about books. So this was before he was president, and I think in the studio was the reporter and David Wolf. Is it? That's what's his name? And then Trump was on a Skype.
Michael
call.
Wolff?
Michael Wolff.
That's the guy who wrote. It could be David Wolff.
Yeah,
anyway,
it's a novelist. And basically said, "Are you a fan of?" He basically said, "Are you a fan of David Wolff?" He's like, "I'm a huge fan. I love his books. I love his books." So what was the last book you read of his? It's like, his last one was fantastic. And it's like, have you read such and such? No, I haven't read that one. And it's like, the reporter's just like, there was this last one. It's just
Sarah Palin. I read all of them.
I'm reading my book. I'm reading my book
books.
at the moment. My book is great. It's fantastic. I love it. I'm rereading it now.
Yeah.
It's just like,
oh my god. But here's a weird one. He did this was mid-aughts. He did a sit down with Earl Morris, the great documentary filmmaker, Thin Blue Line, Fog of War, etc. And Trump talks about Citizen Kane and about Rosebud in a way that's quite coherent and erudite. And for me, which just proves okay, this guy was functionally literate at some stage and now is in the recesses of something. But it's a very weird one. But my God, he dominates all media. He dominates podcasts. We can't stop talking about him. We can't stop watching CNN. And obviously the irony that Jeffrey Zucker, who's the guy who put him on The Apprentice, is now the president of CNN. This is it says something about our journalism and media culture and the failures of American liberalism.
I just jumping back a bit to the books conversation. I always remember. I can't tell you who said the quote or exactly. Maybe Jace could Google it. But there was a very clear line drawn from the difference between Bush and Clinton as presidents. And it was that Clinton would read 3 books a week. That's what he said. I read 3 books a week. And when Bush was asked, his response was, I don't have time to read. And it was it's interesting that...
Sorry, are we talking about H.W.?
George W.
So that would have been Gore.
And Clinton. Well, that was a distinction drawn between Clinton from the following on.
All right.
And I always thought it was interesting as the presidents who read, I wonder if even though one could argue that George W. Bush was saying he's too busy to read, but presidents aren't any busier than the next one on. But Clinton read 3 books a week and George W. Bush was, I'm too busy to read.
If you like books and candidates that read books, then Pete Buttigieg is your guy. And you'll have to, I don't know if the eye roll is coming through. I'm a little bit, all right. So
you are fake news.
Yeah.
Okay, you're fake news.
Maybe it's because of my whatever, where I grew up and knowing kind of the American liberal cultural milieu pretty well. But in American politics and in liberal politics, if a guy is a Rhodes Scholar doing the terrible things, God bless.
Yep.
You know? And for me, like that's a very... So American liberals, they want things to pretty much... They don't necessarily want such a huge transformative change, but they want the people in charge to be well-read. Like, and that's not a great criteria. I mean, was it Himmler that read the Bhagavad Gita or whatever? I mean, like, just because you're read doesn't necessarily give you an ethical core. And Pete Buttigieg, a guy who speaks 7 languages and et cetera, and it doesn't matter that, what his actual policies are and that, in fact, they're very centrist technocrat and let's not do anything about healthcare or the banks or any of that stuff. It's like, well, he's smart. And I just think that's an...
Andrew Yang's pretty smart as well.
Ooh, there's an interesting fella.
I was just thinking as we're talking about this, and I wonder if there's something we can talk about at some stages.
Sure.
I just looked up when the first debate was, and the first debate's next
week.
weekend.
Yeah. Oh, 20 odd?
24.
Oh,
and what
boy.
what I really hope happens, and I'm sure it won't, because even though we're talking about Trump being, the doctrine of Trump, a lot of these people are self-serving, and certainly
they're looking for the book deals and all the rest of it. Yeah.
So they won't. But I really hope that after the first debate, 16 drop out.
That's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, because
I don't think that's going to happen until November of next year. Sadly, which tells you something about.
No,
sorry,
no, because they're going to go through
November
the process
of this year.
Yeah, I was going to say next year's election, November of next year.
Yeah. Sorry, this November. What year are we?
Well, maybe, but it's
the first primary season was really kind of heats up in December, and look. I mean, there's some really, like Hickenlooper. There's de Blasio, that guy from Ohio whose whole shtick is anti-Russian, kind of. There are Russians amongst us. There's some real pearlers out there, if I could use a Kiwiism.
The other thing about Trump that's interesting, and it directly relates to the candidates, is when he scores points with his stupid names, and but it works.
Yes,
the Pocahontas one comes to mind.
Oh my God, there's talk of him live tweeting the debate.
Oh, so in other words, his live stream is going to get more views than the debate.
Of course, because he's got 40 million. I mean, what's he at?
Something like that, less than Obama, half of Obama.
Yeah, I mean, look. Whatever that means. I mean, but to bring it back to, this is why American memes and discourse dominates our politics globally, and why when I was in Fiji, I mean, I would meet avid Trump supporters, is because he uses 60 million. I mean, he uses the platform.
I think Obama's just on 100 million. That's gone up. That's gone up significantly, because I looked at that just the other day. I tweeted the other day, I wonder how annoyed he gets that Obama's got twice the number of people he does.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren, this is I mean, look, whatever, I'm getting into my own personal views and beliefs here. I think she'd make a great Treasury Secretary, but she keeps,
There you go, 107.
She keeps the 23andMe stuff.
But that's the interesting thing,
not political instincts, in my opinion.
From her.
No.
Because then she's claiming Native American blood. And she is Native American blood, but it's such a small, infinitesimal amount.
Also, it's such a stupid and weird way to think of your culture, of there's like something on a spreadsheet that says something somewhere. And of course, people in the community are like, what have you done for us? And we don't know you. Like, what is this weird... all right, I was going to say like middle-aged white lady thing where, sorry, and I shouldn't say that, but there's just
hang on, stop.
Hold on.
Why shouldn't you say that?
Because that's, look, I don't know. I'm typecasting in a certain, it's just a weird...
But she is middle-aged and white. What was?
It's such a superficial way to think about your culture and your identity, and in a kind of abstracted way, and it just smacks of her disconnect and being a upper middle class professional with no connection to those peoples in those communities.
So she's claiming,
so it's sort of like only a kind of privileged white lady could go in and like just kind of adopt that kind of.
Also, for want of a better word, she's trying to get cred.
Yes.
Be that street cred or whatever cred, probably actually left wing cred, for claiming to be part of a group that, even though she might have a very small percentage of bloodline, she's never been actually a part of.
Yeah. So that's a real white privilege thing. I know that word gets used a lot, but like, it doesn't flow in the other direction, right? So, only...
It doesn't flow in the other direction. So if the Native American said, I've got white blood, it doesn't flow that way.
Because of how discrimination and cultural coding...
and that wouldn't mean anything.
Yeah.
That would get you no points anyway because Caucasian is the dominant species, race, whatever.
So it's like her trying on a new identity, new suit. Like it's just so... It's wrong. It's really wrong. And it, again... All right.
Is that going to be enough to screw her this time around?
No.
Because I can just imagine Trump, because he did it with Jeb Bush, he did it with Little Marco, all these people.
Honest to God, I think Biden is polling pretty well right now, in spite of the fact that Biden is literally went to like some millionaires club in New York City and said the things that Hillary said behind closed doors to Goldman Sachs.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a big damaging thing when those transcripts finally came out. Biden's just out there saying it. Hey, we don't want to malign you guys. We don't want to change anything for y'all. You guys are just as patriotic as any other part of and we're going to make you guys feel good about. And so, but so Biden's polling well.
Biden will lose to Trump.
Yeah, I think so. Unless we can blame CNN for giving Trump free media and making him president. If Biden becomes president, I mean, maybe we can thank or blame the Onion, whichever way it goes, because of course the what is the Onion Joe Biden memes? Diamond Joe.
The Onion Joe, I don't know.
So the Onion.
Yeah, I know the Onion.
So Diamond Joe was a very popular kind of long running shtick they had about your kind of dumb, lovable redneck uncle.
Right.
That was a character, Diamond Joe.
Right.
Now that's yeah. Yes. So and that's what he's trading on. He's like, I'm Obama's friend. You guys like Obama.
Yeah.
You like, therefore, ergo, you like me. But I mean, I think there is an interesting.
I saw. I don't know. I think it might have been a comedy skit the other day talking about. Oh, it might have been SNL. And Biden walks in, and
these are genuinely funny.
The African American actress goes, "Oh, it's Obama's granddad," and that was the recognition, the name recognition.
Oh, right.
So I think that's connected to Obama.
Because again, Obama would obviously win if he ran again. Obama is very popular. He is an incredible political talent, and people want to just you say people are flipping out enough to say take me back to the Bush years. Well, obviously Biden is the kind of the normalcy of the Obama years.
So do you know about Lichman? This is the guy who predicted since the 1980s, including predicting Trump's victory.
I see.
By using his formula. Do you know about this guy?
Never heard of him.
Okay, so he has this formula that he uses, and it's like 16 questions or something. And it includes things like, has there been a major policy win? Are they trying for their second term? And he runs the candidates through this. And I think since there they are. They're the questions. Since 1984 or something, he's got every election right, including Trump. He said Trump would win just following this formula. He has just come out. This is just to put the shits up, everybody. He has just come out basically saying, following his formula, unless Trump suffers a couple more pretty big indignations, Trump will win again. Jace, why don't you just play a bit at the top of it? We can claim this with fair use. We're a news source. And so his thing is they should definitely impeach him, and that will be one of the things that'll help, like the formula for him not working out.
9 times. 9. And you say now, and I know we're still early and this is not your official prediction, but you think Trump is it in 2020 unless what?
Unless the Democrats grow a spine and do their constitutional duty and move into an impeachment inquiry. And
so he's not a fan, obviously. But what he's saying is, if you go back down to those questions, Jason, there has to be another big negative in Trump. This is just for his formula, but it's been right.
But what does Trump do though? Because as you say, he can walk into the streets and kill someone, and it'll improve his rating.
No, but it's not about that. It's about that's why he's saying if the Dems want to win, they basically have to impeach him, and if they don't impeach him, according to the formula, and formulas are sometimes wrong, but it hasn't been 9 times in a row, Trump's going to win again.
So I'm an academic, and I've seen some spurious social science concepts in my day, but comparing the polity and the media landscape of 1984 to 2019, 2020 is just simply, that's a category error. I think that I honestly think that the way in which if it's impeachment, it's going to be about Russia. Okay, or the initial framing of Trump's corruption and potential perjury has all been framed through the Russia lens. Because that's the storyline that protects the establishment from the embarrassment of how he got here. Now, of course, it's like, when you're in the backyard and you pick up an old brick and there's lots of slaters underneath. Mm-hmm. That's the Trump administration. Manafort, Cohen, they are the greasiest hangers-on, corrupt to their core. So, of course, Manafort is an absolute sleaze and slime. And I tell you what, you go to K Street, there are a lot more Manaforts out there. Yeah. Actually, Lonnie Davis, the guy representing Michael Cohen, right up there. But nothing has stuck on the actual kind of collusion element of this. So,
when you say stuck,
yeah, well, so nothing.
He hasn't suffered consequences from it, because if you the Mueller report, there's quite a lot in there about obstruction.
Mueller is yes, obstruction. Of course, they are corrupt. They don't know how to. They're not seasoned politicians, and Michael Flynn Sr., another goofus. Sorry, that's a nice way of putting it. So, of course, they're lying left, right, and center, and they're running a campaign which they don't even think they're going to win. So they're having these kinds of solicitations which may be a touch unseemly, but don't seem to cross that actual threshold to, there was actually a Russian plot to install Trump. Now, that's not to say that Russia doesn't do some cyber espionage and nibbling around the edges, but of course, like
America has actually just admitted
on a scale so much more massive that it's not even. I'll give you here's some of the problem with the Russiagate inquiry. There's a firm called New Knowledge, which actually this is an analytics guy that worked for Obama, and they were tasked with giving the kind of official Senate report on the Internet Research Agency and the troll army and memes and all the rest of it. That same company, New Knowledge, ran an experiment for the academic purposes of whatever during the Alabama by-election for Senate with, you remember the Judge Roy Moore, the guy who had a bunch of accusations?
Racist dude.
Yeah. They ran a fake Russian campaign to make it look like Russian bots were supporting Moore, and actually got news stories written saying, Russian troll at a scale larger than what is purported that the Internet Research Agency did for all of America. And their research claims that actually they found no statistically relevant kind of impact of their. But so there's a level of projection that the group that's supposed to be identifying how Russian memes are destroying the fabric of American democracy are literally doing that as mercenaries. And so for me, this has no credibility. There's some details. Of course, they're dodgy. But any impeachment is going to be a part of this 2-year buildup of the Russia stuff. Now, there is stuff around emoluments and Trump's own personal corruption that could be pursued and in the abstract be a good impeachment case, but they haven't been making this case. And impeachment is a political process. You have to be making a case to the public. A lot of the public think, and Trump's base think, that Russia is a witch hunt, and in many ways it more or less is. I mean, the framing of it is just so off. And I think this would have a consolidating effect upon Trump's base. We saw how pathetically low voter turnout was in 2016. And unless the Democrats were able to have an Obama-level talent running against that, then I don't think impeachment serves them at all. And he says, look, I've been trying to make America great, and they've been working against our interests. For 2 years, they've been running this Mueller thing. That's a reasonably compelling storyline for him to his base.
I mean, he hasn't come out. I mean, if you look around his, cabinet and all the accusations and the criminal defences and all those sorts of things, there is a lot of dodginess there. But he's come out of it pretty squeaky clean, according to him and his base. Yeah, but then you also look. This is just news from this week. That the US has gone deep into online attacks on Russia. So surely any sane person goes, well, hang on, how can we be screaming foul if we are doing to them basically exactly what they're doing to us? Look, I'll say it again. The reason that Trump is president today, it's not because of Russia. It's because of the DNC, Hillary Clinton, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. That's the reason. They're the people who caused the revolution against the left to get Trump in. Now, did Russia change it 1%, 2% this way or the other?
Hard to say. I think, but no,
maybe.
To be honest, oh God, I hate to bang on about 2016, and but like the email scandal was actually a scandal.
Of course,
it was actually. So all the liberal kind of, but our emails. I'm like, if I were a public servant, Official Information Act requests are full transparency of my dealings as a public servant, and actually I work for a university, so they are open to official information requests and what FOIA in the U.S. If I've gone and purged my whole transactions while Secretary of State, while kind of again assembling my largesse through the Clinton Foundation and leaning into different governments to help contribute to stuff that yes, that seems pretty bad. That's pretty bad. And to be honest, I don't think Bernie thought he was going to be in a position that he was to run a very serious competitive campaign. And look, maybe he probably should have ran on against her emails. There's that clip early on, but he does really believe in.
Where he's in the hallway and he says, "I'm going to talk about policy."
I'm sick of the damn emails. And like, he does believe in civility, which is great. But obviously, we know what the stakes are now.
It would be interesting to go to Bernie 6 months before the last election and go, if you let Hillary through, Trump's going to be president. So you have a choice here, Bernie. You can start playing dirty to get the nomination, but mean no Trump, or you can keep playing clean, like a lot of people respect him for. Hillary will get there, and Trump is president. I wonder what he'd do.
Hey, listen, it's hard to say because of course you don't have the. So it is interesting. What you're seeing is that the American political the liberal establishment, and I say liberal, not left, will settle for Elizabeth Warren now, because they are scared of Bernie, and that is progress. Because
so what does that mean, that she's the lesser of two evils?
Like all right. So there's a couple of ways of thinking of this. Is like, well, actually, the establishment want Biden, and they'll pump up Warren in a kind of so that the left vote cannibalizes itself between Bernie and Warren, or maybe you take them at their word and say, well, actually, they're willing to contemplate Warren, and she's got some good policies, and like I said, she'd make a really good Treasury Secretary or regulator.
If you were going to pick who the person was going to be today, two things: who do you want, and who do you think? I'm still putting my money. I think Bernie will be the nom. I think that you look at any kind of polling. 18 months out, the person who's leading is never the person who gets the nomination.
That's right. And he's got an infrastructure there. And listen, Biden is still doing the thing of going to the New York Knickerbockers Club or whatever this kind of like elite gentlemen's club or whatever stuff is. And Bernie's having rallies with tens of thousands of people. And that's a really good sign. And there's a certain amount of I can't believe that they'll let him have it.
But after what happened last time, and now it's well known that the DNC screwed him, it'll be harder for them to screw him again. And actually,
Elizabeth Warren was one of the really strong ones to say this was not a fair process.
Yeah,
she said point blank, this was a terrible process.
Someone like Elizabeth Warren as VP, Bernie as president?
Actually, but she'd have more power as a Treasury Secretary, and she would make a great Treasury Secretary. But again, this is just my Christmas wish list now. And some days I have paranoid moments where actually there's a new bylaw so that if they get to the convention and Bernie doesn't have over the threshold, that then the superdelegates come in, and then actually if someone's not been a lifelong Democrat, there's some needling they can do there. So I'm a little bit, maybe I'm traumatized by 2016. I mean, because I was genuinely this was a remarkable thing. Clinton was running a coronation process, and then this lovable lefty outsider that we all knew from the guy, the one guy speaking at the anti-war protests or whatever. Somehow that was a real thing on people's lips across the country. And then so maybe I was a little bit too giddy. But yeah, I think, and I'd make a real rational case for why people like authenticity, and they like his no charisma authenticity, the consistency. You can set your watch to his policies, and over 30 years, they've been the same. This is not, Liz Warren, she's got her qualities, but she was a Republican into the late 90s. I mean, she was a Republican all throughout Reagan. That's when things started going really bad for a lot of middle class Americans, and not to lionize the middle class, but those are the people who vote. And so yeah, I do think for those reasons he'd be really strong, but I can't believe they're going to let him run.
Do you think there is a problem? And look, we haven't even really talked about Fox News yet, which is what happens. We just chat. But again, I'm interested actually in your research. Your research basically looking at sort of the left and the right, and then the right media world. I'm really interested at the moment in what's happening, especially let's say with, millennials and Gen Xers,
right,
in America and specifically. In the whole world of social justice movements, social justice warriors, what's happening on college campuses, the Evergreen University and the Brett Weinstein, that kind of thing.
Geez.
I wonder.
Sorry, you're gonna tee me off now.
I wonder. Good. I wonder. Go to YouTube, Jace, and look up Evergreen University Weinstein.
This is, I swear,
Weinstein, whichever it is, and I wonder. There seems to be, it always has been on the left, it's very easy to become
caricatured by right-wing media?
No, to be what's the word? Like not united, whatever the word is for not united.
Exactly.
Whereas on the right, it seems to be easier
and actually
to get
disunity
a
is fine for the right because they're backed by billionaire power, so they don't actually need to be, in a sense, disciplined the way. Yeah,
well, let's just do this. Can you bring up that college campus?
Do we have to? I think this.
Say that one there. The students take over Evergreen University.
I think that one's fake news.
Well, we can have a look. So this is a fairly. Okay,
I know this incident.
Let me be fair, and because obviously you're thinking that this is not a fairly typical situation or being unfair, that there is a lot of footage often of university students in America. And look, I mean, comparatively it's very small compared to how many people are at university, but there does seem to be this what's classified as a social justice movement of extreme views at university, which is probably the place you want to have extreme views, at university.
Listen, I would love to be yelled and screamed at by some of my students for being a cis-het white. Well, no, I'm sort of tongue-in-cheek here, but yes, I do want universities to be that place.
But the difference is now, it seems that this bastion of ideas and pushback against society and a place you go to scream and yell, and days gone by would give you a space to do that, and then encourage it, whereas now it seems to be a space that sometimes what we're being shown on the internet is a place that then folds to those yelling and screaming.
All right. So there's a great podcast called Citations Need It, and they did a really great...
Don't come on my podcast and advertise other podcasts. What the hell are you doing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, owned. All right. Is there like a toilet flush button on the soundboard you could... all right. All right. All right. All right, let me be specific. Yeah. So there's a writer, his name is Connor Friedsdorf. He writes for The Atlantic. And honestly, there has been no, and of course he's a young Republican guy, and he's not a bad writer, and he's not a red meat guy. Like, he kind of couches it in kind of intellectual terms, and he's probably the guy that in 2015-16 wrote more kind of like, protest at Oberlin College because of something they served in the cafeteria was cultural appropriation, or like, he's that guy that just churns these things out.
Yep.
And we also know, I talked a little bit about the kind of like right-wing infrastructure to kind of get young Republicans mobilized and get these people media and journalism careers. So like, these are the Turning Points USA people that are capturing little instances of, PC outrage culture, and then blowing them up and circulating them to Breitbart and all the rest of it. Now, do young people at age 19 experimenting in political ideas have fully coherent worldviews and fully fledged ideas for how to like take on climate and social justice and economic justice. Of course not. They're 19 years old, but I honestly, I encourage, and I want to, in my own kind of like academic space, foster as much of that kind of like thinking about those issues as possible. Now, sorry, my daughter, she's 14 years old, and she's just kind of coming to, I don't know, kind of social justice warrior ideas. I don't mean that disparagingly, but like things around gender, sexuality, and she's being able to identify a problem. And like,
I think she's talking to my daughter, isn't she?
They probably are, and I'll use bad language in the house, like no, like just stupid like tropes that are like
such as
I wouldn't say grow a pair, but like that's an example of the kind of thing I might say.
Yeah.
I don't think, but other things is slightly, and she'll say, "Dad, you can't say things like that because, etc." And she's like, "I'm, no, I think you're right, Naomi. I mean, this is great that you're but like, okay, so you're knocking me back for my language, and I get that, but can you shape that into a coherent ethic and worldview? And what are the ideas that can make you think about how you're going to change?" like institutional sources of power around gender and equality. And that, listen, that's way too much for a 14-year-old, but that's the kind of direction we want to send young people.
No, look, I don't know if that's too much for a 14-year-old.
And the one thing I'll say is, if SJWism is a problem, and I don't think it is, it's because we live in post-ideological times where we've been told that any kind of social democratic left or the ideas of Marx or anything else is straight first-class ticket to the gulag or leads to totalitarianism, which is a thing that since the fall of the Berlin Wall, our political culture has been suffused with. I think that's a false idea. So yes, I think young people are lacking in sort of the political bearings, but that's an indictment of like our politics in this moment. The fact that we have weak affiliations to political parties because, well, I mean, if you're a member of the Labour Party in New Zealand or Democrats in America, like, yeah, these parties have betrayed their traditional constituencies. So that's not the SJW's fault. That's a reflection of our particular moment.
So what is the SJW, the social justice warrior, for those uninformed?
Right,
what are they trying to do? Like, what is the? I mean, if what you're saying is,
I think this
it sounds
is
like
an
what you're saying
archetype.
is there's
No,
not the structure around them in some way, like the not affiliation with. Like, I'd like to know how many members of the New Zealand Labour Party there actually are, as an interesting side bit. Like, are there 20,000? Are there 200,000? I have no idea.
And
I know there has to be 5,000 for it to be a party, because parties in the past have had that as an issue to be actual parties. So if there's not the structure, or if it's the fault almost of society or of us or of this around them, what are they trying to achieve, and how do we make space for it?
That's oh my God.
Because my daughter, who plays soccer with your daughter,
true story.
There are massive, not fake news. We're having massive conversations at the moment about gender issues and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Massive issues. And what I try and do with her, because when I say that's too much for a 14-year-old, I don't know if I agree, because what I try and do with her as much as possible is I try and give her the perspective of what's out there.
Right.
This is what happens, this is what happens, this is what happens. Some people are saying that, someone transitioning from male to female, and then competing in weightlifting is unfair. These are the reasons they say why, etc., and then, this is what it means. And the one that we had the other day, we were talking about how gender is a social construct, and so therefore I can identify my gender however I want. And so we talked through second wave feminism, and actually gender as a social construct is an external thing, because it's society putting gender on you.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense to go, gender is a social construct so I can identify whatever gender I want, because gender as a social construct is an external force. Feminists explained, educated, told us that society is putting this gender on me. Society says girls wear pink. Society says boys play with trucks. That's the opposite of someone self-identifying. So I'm wondering at the moment about maybe there's a gap in the language, and this is what we talked about the other day.
Right.
Maybe there's a gap in the language at the moment, and we don't quite know how to explain what's going on. But saying gender is a social construct, so therefore I can identify my gender, is an oxymoron, because gender as a social construct is external.
Right. So how do we socially construct the space for people to, whether it's
Self-identify?
fluidity, self-identify,
I
whatever it is.
I actually think we're missing the language for it at the moment. I reckon
Yeah.
that's the problem, because we're taking language, i.e. gender as a social construct, that doesn't make sense for self-identifying. It's an anathema. It's the opposite.
Again, like it's also like contact in the settler. Maori meant person. Excuse me. Sorry if I'm butchering that. Or I am Maori. I'm a person. But then, of course, in colonial contact, that means, I'm now actually like a subject of colonialism, and I need to think about myself. And then the construction of that as a nation, and nation is obviously a kind of a foreign concept. I mean, listen, sorry, it's obviously a lot more complicated than that. But the political force, political projects categorize and classify as a very kind of like Foucault kind of like basic point. And then our question, is it to resist classification or create new classifications? And that's how language, just to bring it back to the PC. I mean, language matters. And so I think that what young people are doing in and around that is really important. And I think, Evergreen, Weinstein, whatever, completely disingenuous. He's like this fake, like, well, I was a leftist, but they attacked me. It's like, no, we're doing a kind of generational politics here, and that's self-serving for a particular set of right-wing politics that's always been anti-campus. But yes, we absolutely need new ideas of how to kind of politically create things. The one thing I'll say, though, is that if you think about like what was a kind of, I don't know, an epochal political moment for the last 10 years, we had something like Tahrir Square or Occupy Wall Street, and there was a certain fetish made out of non-hierarchical, very kind of anarchist views, right?
Yeah.
Of like decentralizing political decision making and horizontal institutions and all the rest of it. And that is a product of this broader thing of like, traditional left-wing social democratic politics is bad for all these reasons. And yes, historically, they have not been necessarily always the best places for women and people of color by today's standards, but actually by those days' standards, they were kind of good. So I'm not ready to throw in the towel on kind of traditional left politics, while also like, wanting to learn a lot more from what young people are up to. Well, I mean, we don't want to fetishize, the children are the future, blah, blah, blah. But
treat them well and let them show the way.
Yeah.
Is that what Michael Jackson said? Something like that.
No, that was Whitney Houston.
Sorry. They look the same.
Whitney and Bobby, so tragic.
I do really feel that so much of society these days, and maybe so much of the confusion and conflict, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but it does feel like, and I see this in conversations with my kids, that we are in a transitional time in history. I guess you could argue you're always in a transitional time, but there is a specific transitional time at the moment, and our language hasn't caught up. To go down the wrong way.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Our language hasn't caught up with what we're trying to do. So one of the things that's happening is people are grasping onto ways of communicating, and it's not quite right. And I know that might be weird to say, because communication is communication. Is there a right? Is there a wrong? But as the example I just gave, I think,
I mean, yes, of course, language is part of it, but I think there is a kind of like structural mechanism to how social media kind of assembles us and constitutes our social networks, and privatizes a lot of kind of the place in which we talk about our politics and our identity, and isolates, alienates, individuates us. That's part of, I mean, like, fascism or populism is actually like the kind of tyranny of like the nuclear patriarchal kind of setup. Like, it's not a mass politics, it's anti-mass politics. And then I think on the flip side of that, on the left side of that, is an individualized kind of, there's a lot of talk about mental health online, and it's really good that we are talking and breaching these subjects and there's awareness of that. But I do think a lot of that is a product of, yes, like we live our lives through self-narrativizing because we're constructing kind of the pictures and profiles of ourselves through all these various kind of social media platforms. So they're not really necessarily geared to helping think of us as a public, as a mass, as a kind of political public unit in that traditional way. We're very kind of individuated, and, you know, part of like what drives the algorithms and you know, what drives media consumption online is emotion and affect. So to the extent that whatever the kind of new left politics of campus culture is increasingly affective or heavily emotional, like I think that's sort of a problem a little bit. I mean, I see this in my students' writing, or in kind of, you know, what's going out there in student media and publications. It's very much we've lost the capacity to think about ourselves in this bigger kind of political unit, and I think that's the big problem. Some of that's language, some of that's kind of like structural. Again, I said it before, but like, you know, less political civic participation. And look, sorry to sound like a boomer or whatever, but like, you know, the way in which young people's social lives are constructed is in, you know, in these privatized little spaces. Like, we don't actually, I remember we used to like go to United Video, get the $8 new release video game and go to a mate's place and maybe all share but now literally gaming with a friend is a remote thing that you do in your own like little isolated little, you know, compression chamber or whatever. I mean, being a little bit hyperbolic, but that is a kind of structural interface of how we think of ourselves in the world. It's a problem.
I also wonder if, and might be, you know, the most obvious thing said today, is that we are living in a time where nuance is gone and black and whites seem to be the order of the day. I once wrote a piece on my blog years ago talking about how ideology often gets in the way of intelligent debate. Because I have this philosophy, and you're welcome to shoot it down if you like, but I have this philosophy that no one will ever claim that they're always right, which means sometimes you have to be wrong.
Right.
And people who are ideologues, heavy ideologues, always seem to claim they've got the right answer. And the piece I wrote about was when I was supporting two unions. I supported the teachers' union when they didn't want to have national standards coming in, and I supported it, wrote a piece, and then they got used on the NZUI website. So I was a massive lefty for that. And then I wrote a piece about the Ports of Auckland union and what they were doing with some strikes, and I put forward a logical and argumentative piece that in that case I didn't think what they were doing was right. And of course then I was a right-wing warmonger. And it's like, actually the point I was making was nuance says this is why I support that position that time, and this is why I don't support that position that time. It doesn't mean that I'm either, you know, massively left or massively right in those writings. It means nuance says sometimes that side can be right and sometimes that side can be right. And an ideologue typically goes, I've always got the answer. Right. I'm always right. And that's just not possible.
In defense of ideology, sometimes you need a shorthand to how to structure and think about the world.
Sure.
That's, I think, a really important, powerful thing that we're lacking. Second of all, I would say that, you know, extremes, black and white. Yeah, I mean, so what's really interesting about debates about free speech and the emergence of the IDW, intellectual dark web, and the Petersons and the Shapiros of the world somehow being the kind of stalwarts of free speech is that on the one hand, you know, free speech is this ideal of almost like the Greek agora and all of these great trappings of classical rhetoric and thinking of it as an art, or, you know, a thing that with all the kind of like civic virtue attached to it. And then, we're just actually screaming at each other online and dressing that up as whatever free speech with the capital F or something. So I think there's a lot being smuggled into what the IDW are claiming is free speech and such. It also comes back to this notion of like, what is the public? What is the public space? What are the political vehicles and mechanisms by which we enact political power and the power of free speech, and you know, I mean, how not just Facebook but corporate media and all the rest of it impinge upon that. Like, I also think that so often the nuance part of it would come in. So if you're sometimes some abhorrent
groups, ideas, ideologies come in behind an idea which doesn't seem that bad. It doesn't seem that bad. Jordan Peterson, for example, his initial, and I'm just not going by his intention or his truth, but the initial idea that the government can't force me to use a word.
Right.
I actually agree with that. But that thing.
And he's really smart at knowing where to pull back from the implications of his arguments.
But the point being, if the government said to anyone in New Zealand, from now on, you must call New Zealand Aotearoa, and if you don't, it will be a crime, there'd be an uproar, rightfully so. So the purest aspect of what he says, I agree with, that the government can't force me to use it. Now, and make it clear, I'm not saying everything he says I support.
And interestingly,
but then what comes up behind that very simple idea, that's the...
And what's so funny is seeing...
Is that a byproduct or the intention? That's the question.
Yeah. So, well, there was a really interesting point at which he had a massive... he's had a few kind of Patreon hits. One was when he and I think Weinstein were opposed to Brett Kavanaugh. Or actually, it was a pathetic opposition because Jordan Peterson said something like, every option is bad. Like, he's clearly a disgusting monster. But then, like, he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. But, like, so kowtowing to these awful accusations, baseless accusations, was also bad. So it was like pleasing nobody. And so his real base were like, no, we follow you because you're the guy that makes us feel empowered as men, and we want to not like feminists and stuff, and all the rest of it. So that was a kind of funny moment. And then also when the Patreon deplatformed, I think it was Owen Benjamin, who is a weird, like, Google Owen Benjamin. He went from conventional showbiz guy to alt-right to whoa. And Peterson didn't initially quit Patreon over that. And again, because the majority of his followers, they're not there for like the kind of to the letter of the law argument that he's neatly containing and packaging. They're there for all that other stuff
that comes by
to talk about Judeo-Bolshevism and cultural Marxism and all that.
And what will happen is if Jordan Peterson makes a position or takes a stance that is contrary to what those people want, then he'll be a pariah. And I've seen it. I grew up and I've worked a lot and I've been involved a lot in the church world.
Right.
And so the classic example is, let's say it's a musician, or let's say it's someone like Tony Campolo. To the church world will know he's like a massive evangelical figurehead, incredibly popular, the Rob Bells of this world, who was very popular. And then all of a sudden they come out in support of something like same-sex marriage.
Right.
And then they're pariahs.
Yep.
And you get, for example, musicians who play on, quote-unquote Christian radio stations. I say quote-unquote because many Christian radio stations don't act very Christian. But then they come out and support, and all of a sudden they're off the playlist.
Right.
That kind of thing. So it's a more minor thing. But if all of a sudden there's an ideological change somewhere, or even an ideological idea, tomorrow it's almost like live by the sword, die by the sword. He could be a pariah in a heartbeat. Yeah,
and actually, the other funny thing about this is like Patreon, like a lot of these tech companies, loses so much money. Like if your future is staked on Patreon, I mean, you gotta look really hard and close at that, because again, like Uber, like Netflix, there are all these startups that keep getting tons and tons of venture capital because they're going to be the next unicorn, or they're going to be the Amazon for X, whatever, the Amazon for shareable content, whatever. So that's another kind of aspect of this. But yeah, Jordan Peterson, pretty savvy. He knows who his base is. They're reasonably stable. I think his base is, reasonably educated. It's not the QAnon people, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And boy, now that's a volatile kind of like social media market. But I mean, look, there's Quillette and a lot of other kind of these right-wing kind of outlets are being taken very seriously and doing pretty well. And Jordan Peterson is a huge bestseller. He goes on Radio New Zealand, and Catherine Ryan, who's a pretty astute broadcaster, has no questions to ask him about his attacks on cultural Marxism and blah, blah, or Alex Peritet had him on, interviewed him about decided to interview him about high suicide rates, and Jordan Peterson was just like, yeah, it's really bad, and you guys as a country might just have to one day decide up and move these rural communities. And it's like, he's calling for some kind of weird repatriation, or it's not
urbanization,
and like, who is Jordan Peterson to speak on these issues? But then, a guy like Alex Pertet, who is a good journalist, sees this, best-selling, one of the big public intellectuals, just lets him kind of have a go at all that kind of stuff. He's not shy.
But then Jim Jeffries gets him on Comedy Central.
Oh, yeah, that was great. Yeah, that was really good.
Hey, look, what's your timetable like? We're at 20 past 1 at the moment.
Wow, geez,
I know.
You wanted to be Joe Rogan. I'm pushing into that 2-hour category.
I was just going to ask. I think I'd like to wrap up talking a little bit about media.
Okay.
And the things that I feel like have come up, because obviously you did your thesis, etc., in Fox News and the liberal versus Fox, etc., etc.
Yep.
But it seems at the moment there's quite a big conversation around deplatforming and new media.
Right.
Have you had any look into that? The Stephen Crowders of this world.
God, Crowder. All right.
Hang on.
That is such fake news.
There you go. Right in there.
Stephen Crowder.
But just in general.
In general, the take on deplatforming.
You can talk about Stephen Crowder if you want.
Well, you know that, like, his claim to fame, again, one of these college Republican guys was to go to Wisconsin during the protests and punch a guy, get himself punched, and then edit the video and then go on Fox News for weeks on end of footage of him getting punched in the face to, like, talk about these jackbooted, union thugs that... And he's a failed, again, another failed showbiz guy. He was on Arthur. He was a voice on, the cartoon show Arthur.
That little kind of
the
monkey
mole
thing.
or
whatever it was.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he was a failed stand-up comedy guy because he's not funny.
Obviously, ad hominems aside, that's a fairly relative position.
Well,
there is a very interesting clip online though.
All right,
with him and Amy Schumer, where Amy Schumer basically talks about him being involved in sort of the Christian comedy world and not giving him full credit. But anyway, let's
Fox News said he's no longer welcome in our building.
How come?
Because he's a liar and he's not funny.
Oh.
Yeah, it was like that memo is like, whoo, okay, deep platforming. My God, all right. So
because I guess this is the media that we're talking about now. I mean, obviously, old media, be it it's cable news considered old media probably because it's a television format.
Yeah,
but new media is the place that people seem to be getting it. Various broadcasts and podcasts and internet channels, especially in the States. The likes of a Crowder or a Rogan or a Young Turks or whatever are getting more viewers, more eyes, more ears.
That's right.
Than the cable news networks.
And here's the thing that's so crucial. I don't want our decisions about what media is accessible where, and when we're talking about YouTube, we're talking about like accessible to anyone, however, whatever age, all the rest of it. I don't want that decision to be made in a Facebook or Google, in the case of YouTube, boardroom, out of the kind of goodness of their own hearts, because there is no goodness in those hearts. I'm really sorry to say. Like the record on YouTube and Facebook and being completely indifferent to the emergence of far right and white supremacist content on their platforms has been super well documented. The New York Times did a great feature on this recently. It's also very profitable because it's emotionally charged content, and that's what people engage with, and that's how people consume more and more. And then your queue list on YouTube just keeps driving you. I want, in an ideal solution, magic. If I'm God Emperor Trump,
God Emperor Clinton.
Okay, sorry, God Emperor Sanders. I want these companies to be liable to whatever a BSA type legal framework, so maybe there's problems with BSA, but whatever because these companies, Facebook and throw Uber in there, exist on cannibalizing and undoing the legal infrastructures and kind of consensus around things like, what is speech and what is publication, and basically there was a section in the 1996 Telecommunications Act passed in the U.S. by Clinton. Section Common Decency Act 230, which basically says Google, Facebook, YouTube, of course they weren't in that form yet, but internet companies will not be liable for what they publish. There'll be platforms. There'll be the infrastructure, but they will not be legally liable. And that's the very thing that makes them profitable.
So the Range Rover the company of Range Rover won't be reliable. Won't be reliable. Is that the right word? Anyway,
responsible for what's on.
If I take their big heavy Range Rover and do a smash and grab with it. So as the car company, they're not available for me using that car to break the law.
It's curious though, because that sounds like it's the same as similar law that they're using to prosecute Kim.com. Because if he can be charged for piracy,
no, it's different.
But if his platform, if his platform was what allowed him to
I'll tell you.
Here we go.
No, the difference with him is the accusation is he encouraged people and paid people to share stolen copyright. Like basically there was a reward system, and I never used Mega Upload.
Okay, that's
but there was a reward system that if you got a certain number of shares,
you became a gold tier.
They would pay you. There'd be a financial reward.
Okay.
So the difference is it's not just a platform. There was a financial.
I didn't know that. So.
Yeah. I actually spoke to when I was working in a radio show.
Yep.
I spoke to the FBI about it. It was like as a part of what we were doing, and their perspective on it was very interesting.
That's okay. So that I've written an article on an academic article on that internet party escapade. I mean, my God, what a comedic, spectacular failure that was. But it was a really interesting one for thinking about how we think of the internet as an organizing tool. But just to bring it back,
so deplatforming.
Facebook, YouTube, their whole business model is based on not taking responsibility for anything that happens on their platforms. I mean, imagine what you could do with any business if that's how it was structured and set up. And it's structured and set up to, undermine what we have, our legal kind of consensus in law around what Alex Jones is saying about Sandy Hook or all the rest of it, or incitement and all those other things. And I just think that power needs to be taken back.
But isn't it? I think my ram raid's a very good analogy, but let's talk about the marketplace or the public square.
Yep.
If I go into the Octagon and start spouting hate speech or whatever, the DCC is not responsible for what I say. The DCC, Dunedin City Council, for people who are outside Dunedin, because that's the space that I'm making, that I'm portraying my message. If I did something illegal in that area, the DCC is not going to get charged.
That's true, but you are in a public space that is policed.
Right.
So it's easy in a sense if there's recourse. If you are menacing in a certain way.
But the people who own, quote unquote, own that platform, the area, they're not responsible for my actions.
The thing is that cyberspace, the platform, YouTube, Facebook, are not policeable because they are purely corporate entities.
Why are they not policeable?
It could be the same though. As I think maybe your analogy might be a little bit need a bit more trumping up. Fake news. If the DCC provided you with a free megaphone, maybe in the square they left megaphones out there for the public to use,
and it's profiting off of your traffic.
What did you say before, Jasper? Because I was going
to. I don't know. Hold on.
We were talking about it being profitable.
Yes.
We were talking about it.
So it's policeable. All right. So
policeable. Stop. So hang on. Stop.
Yep,
the policeable thing. It'd be interesting to see what that means, because I know that, for example, if you send, in some countries, the UK is one of them, and it's starting to happen in New Zealand since the Christchurch mosque shooting.
Yes.
If you send a certain tweet or you make a certain public online, you will get a visit from the police.
Yep.
In America, if you make a threat to the president, the Secret Service will turn up on your doorstep. So when you say it's not policeable, explain that.
So the mechanism and scale of the scope and scale of Facebook as a platform is just so broad that they literally, like when in Rohingya, when all of the incitement to genocide was happening, like they literally didn't have the language capacity to understand what was going on their platform. So they can't police their own platform, even if you take seriously for one moment that they really at their core feel passionately about being a safe, happy, friendly public space that's an ideal for whatever civics in the 21st century. Now, the ability of lawmakers and whatever cyber crime units to have a handle on that is greatly, much smaller than Facebook's own capacity for that. So I think this is a conversation, I believe, that it has to be put back on them to be responsible for what goes on in their platform. And then the decision about Crowder, Jones, whoever, is not, again, it's not a corporate crisis PR decision that they have to make. It's literally like a public legal question for us
I think
as
that,
citizens.
ironically and incredibly sadly, since the terrorist attack in Christchurch, that seems to be happening more. We are struggling to put things on Facebook. We are struggling to put things up, and we are trying to boost things, and they're getting declined.
Well,
and
this happened after 2016. Is they changed the algorithm, so this will not. So the American political season will be nothing like 2016.
Yeah,
because they've completely deprioritized like politics. They call it the friends and family algorithm. So that's going to be a real problem. And of course, we don't see under the hood of what they're doing there.
Yep.
It's just like it's a PR decision. Oh, everybody's complaining about Russian trolls. We got to do something. That's not a so it is our public space. It's our public space that we can't, know what the mechanisms are. And in your case, and there are in the deplatforming purge, and Matt Taibbi wrote about this. There's tons of people that have spent tens of thousands of dollars with all the kind of little Facebook tools and advertising and all the rest of it over, however many processes of years, or accounts that had, hundreds of thousands of likes that were doing legitimate things that completely deleted, deplatformed. So even when you get Alex Jones or whatever, you're taking other people along with you on this completely arbitrary kind of mechanism that is a kind of a decision over how public space and discourse happens that I do not want that corporation to have control over.
So would you rather it was just the Wild West? Everything goes?
No.
What would you rather than?
I would, all right, in my dream world.
Waving the wand again.
Yeah. Let's bring back the NZBC. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. But like, could we have a New Zealand social media platform? Seriously.
Run by
the NZBC or a state broadcast, cyber state broadcaster.
But you're still going to have a people at the top or a board at the top or something that's still going to make editorial decisions.
But my God. But these will be ombudsmen who are publicly accountable and appointed by governments that we elect and whose decisions are completely audited and transparent.
So for want of
and the algorithm that you can look at the algorithm through an official information request.
Exactly, because the algorithm is proprietary.
So you want
the
YouTube?
Algorithm is like one of the most guarded things. Like that is their thing. That's like their most guarded secret with Facebook and YouTube is their algorithm.
That's right.
So you want Facebook and YouTube as run by the government?
Listen, you look. I know this is kind of like the whole. All right. No. It's
I'm
fine.
just trying to nutshell
you are saying that, and I am in a certain sense saying that. And the whole cyber movement. And when did we start with this?
You're such a communist.
Yeah. Well, listen, the whole cyber movement is based on this antithesis to the notion of government as this prime evil in our lives. And I'm actually, for me, I read Philip K. Dick novels and I'm like, nah, actually, it will be a corporate dystopia that is the true dystopia.
So that's never going to happen. So
it's probably not.
No. It's it's never going to happen, because even if it did happen, no bastard's going to move their information across to there, and no millennial is going to all of a sudden go look under the place that is the government.
Well, it's happened before. Like in France, there was a thing called Minitel, which was, again, because if you think what is a social network, it's like a phone book with added features, and Minitel was that, and it had a kind of public-private mix, and it has a very kind of retro, futurist 90s computer vibe. But it is possible. Like the internet is a product of...
When was that?
So mid 90s, I think it ended. I think it ended in the early millennium.
So if that happened today and had to go up against Facebook, YouTube, Twitter,
but this is the thing: is that Facebook, and again, they make billions of dollars off of, in a sense, privatizing public bandwidth. And we used to have a social contract about this, whether it's BBC, NZBC, you name it. You get access to the bandwidth in return for a certain amount of coverage on civic issues, on politics, election coverage, you name it, equal access to certain political groups. In America, there was this thing called the Fairness Doctrine, which again, Fox News will tell you is communist marching orders, but has a notion of the public at its core. And so if it's analogous, if they're doing a same function as TV and all these other different media in times past, why could we not hope for some kind of public ethic in our social media or in cyberspace? I'm not saying that's easy, but I do think when we start having all these conversations about Cambridge Analytica, Russia, Myanmar, whatever, there's a very similar set of causes of what tech capitalism and social media companies are doing to our democracies. And if we're serious about our democracies, then those are the kind of conversations we need to be having. We'll see where it goes. Maybe we can invade America, take over Silicon Valley. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, one of the things about being in Dunedin,
yes,
is there is an active group of guys and girls, people. I use guys in the plural. Don't want my daughter to say it's the wrong phrase to use.
Non-gender binary sense.
Non-gender binary, fluid, pronoun correct and not correct, who are actively trying to turn that factory district into New Zealand Silicon Valley. They use that terminology. They're trying to
honestly,
do that.
That's like, what was the Goebbels quote? When I hear people say the next Silicon Valley, it's a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, but that's everybody's saying that the next Silicon Valley. But that's literally that's the monorail.
But look, you can't have it both ways. You can't go, let's try and get, and then go, fuck those guys. I don't know what they're doing. You can't. You got what you should be doing is going, so maybe that's where, because I think, I understand when we talk almost academically, theoretically, about it's never going to happen like that. It's just not, because you're not going to force people into that model. So the next
we don't have the mechanisms for government to break up. Like, I mean, look, they broke up Standard Oil, but that was a long time ago. But that's what it would take.
The next best thing would be having ethical and moralistic leadership within the companies, or to have one of those come up as a commercial, venture that doesn't maybe follow the same.
The problem is that, like, Elon Musk will go on and say, "Oh, Facebook is the worst company," and but
didn't know he was Jamaican.
No, this was my South African. I'm really sorry. We've been podcasting.
Whenever I try and do it,
I'm in podcast delirium right now. But Musk will say, "Oh, Zuckerberg, the worst." But my company, oh my God, my company is one. So there's a lot of this kind of
but would you own a Tesla if you could?
No, hell no.
You'd rather drive.
They're like a fire hazard, man. They're like unsafe. Anyway, and for all of this kind of like, would you have a government? So I mean, like, Elon Musk is a government contractor.
Yeah.
Like, and his thing's not profitable. He's just a great salesperson. Well, great to a certain, I don't know. The Elon Musk stands, the Pickle Rick Elon Musk people, like, but like so many of these people, they're just like, they're government contractors, but they want to spin this kind of tale of like cyber libertarian independence and liberty and all that kind of nonsense. Do
you know one of the ironies of this kind of conversation?
What's that?
I don't think we really talked about Fox News at all.
It's a very we've had a very kind of Seinfeld podcast about nothing,
So what that means is later on the year you have to come back.
All right,
and we'll talk again, and we'll talk about.
It would be my pleasure.
About politics and stuff. We'll get Patman in. You and Patman and me have a chat.
Oh yeah. I know Robert pretty well. Yeah. But no 2016. There'll be blanket ban on 2016.
Well, let's wait till we go from 20. We narrow down from 24 candidates to 22 or something.
I think we're fated to live. It's some kind of weird simulation that's like glitching, that we're fated to live in the politics of 2016 for the rest of eternity.
Well, there's a little bit difficult not to when fucking Trump keeps bringing it up. I mean, at his rally, talking about 2020, talking about the emails and talking about it. So it's difficult.
He carries around electoral college maps still, doesn't he?
Yes.
Probably.
Oh my God.
Did you hear the latest was he got his internal polling came back and 17 out of 17 Democrats were beating him in his own internal polling.
Wow.
And so do you know what his response was?
Terrible.
He fired the pollsters.
But honestly, there's this guy, Bill Mitchell, he used to say, you got to uncuck the polls.
Yeah.
This is like the big Trump pollster booster guy, and he was right.
Well, the thing is, and I've said this before, and people don't quite get how it works in America, the last polls were correct for the last election because they were nationwide polls.
Right.
And it said Clinton would win by about 3%. and she won the
right.
overall vote by about 3%. So actually the polls were correct, but the polls didn't look at the college vote.
Great system. Just
I know.
wonderful system.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Oh, my God.
Anyway,
All right.
I think we've come to a natural end.
Thanks, Pat.
Did you want to have? Do you have a little cuddle with my my Trump troll?
No.
If people are wondering, actually, because this has been a bit stupid, we have a new addition to the thing. It's our little fake news button.
Fake news. Fake news.
You know what I needed? I needed from me was one of those Dave Chappelle Wrap It Up.
Yeah.
Do you remember Chappelle Show Wrap It Up?
Dave Chappelle Show is the greatest ever skit comedy show in history. And his stand-up at the moment on Netflix is unsurpassed. It's amazing if you haven't seen it.
It's okay. It's not peak golden era, early aughts Chappelle, but yeah.
It's pretty good.
All right, Pat, this was awesome. Thank you.
All right, guys.
I'm Rick James.
Thank you. Ooh. We'll see you sometime.
Sweet. Catch you.